Okay, I'm back. I finally found it. It bounced somewhere you wouldn't even believe. Anyways, that's the way it goes. At least it was fairly big to find. So you want to tie a double knot in 3 places. Don't worry if it's not lined up on your first one, because once you get all 3 tied together, it will be just fine. I thought I already cut 2 more, didn't I? I got distracted with losing the landing gear wire. I'll cut 2 more here. Oh, there's one. Okay. It's hard to see sometimes. So you want to do this on all 3. Got to make sure I'm keeping this in frame. And again, tie a double knot in it. There's one. There's 2. Okay. Then we'll do the last one. You get the 2 tied together and it pretty much lines right up. The last one's easier. And then again, once you get that last one, you tie a double knot. Excuse me. And you trim the ends off. I like to leave about a 1/16 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch. Don't trim them flush. Okay, now that we've got our landing gear, focus there, tied in place, I like to take medium CA and coat the whole thing. Coat your knots, coat the gear where it touches the plywood. This makes a really strong joint and it won't break. You'll be able to bend the landing gear on a bad landing, but you won't knock it loose from the plywood. And since I'm in a hurry, I'm going to spray some accelerator on it. Let that set up. I'll set that to the side for a second. Now, we're going to pop out our fuselage sides. And get all these little tabs popped out. Okay, there's that one. Okay, got those. We're not going to worry about the doublers just yet, or the top and bottom pieces. So we'll set those to the side. what we're going to want first is firewall and the landing gear that we just made. We're going to want F3 and F4, the battery tray, and your servo trays. Go ahead and pop all the scrap parts out of those. Okay, one thing you always want to make sure of on these push rod holes, make sure they're cleared out before you start gluing. Because if you don't, you'll glue those little bitty pieces of balsa in there, and it'll be real hard for you to get your push rods through. So just take your push rod wire, hook them through those holes, make sure they're clear. Okay. And I know I say this every video, but I'm going to keep saying it. Keep your kit bag because it makes a great non-stick surface. The cyanoacrylate glue will not stick to it. So, actually the first thing we need to do is glue our servo trays together. Just a light bit to take the little sprue ticks off. You see, just enough. And we'll pop those together. Should be a fairly tight fit. Once you do that, take your 10CA and run a tiny bead into that crack. It won't take long to set up because it's such a close fit. Alright, so we'll take F3. You'll notice F3 has an arrow in it. That means it goes up. Anytime you see an arrow on one of our kits, it will point up or it'll point left or right to the direction it needs to go. Any arrow that you see going up, it will be, that side will go up, always. Alright, so F3 goes there. Your servo tray is completely symmetrical, so you can't put it in wrong. Line it up with the next two tabs. Slide it in there. Your battery tray, go ahead and knock the little sprue ticks off. This takes a light wipe. And again, this is universal. You can install it either way. There's no wrong way to put this one in as long as you put it in the right slot. And your landing gear former goes right there. You want your wire on the front side of the former. Don't put it on the back side or it'll interfere with the wing. So make sure your wire is on the front side of that bulkhead. Okay, at this time we can take the other fuselage side and carefully line up all the tabs and slots. Usually do one at a time. Once you get a couple in, they start lining up pretty easily though. Of course, I'm on camera, so it's going to be just a little more difficult than normal. There you go. Those are all lined up. You want to make sure that the fuselage sides are fully seated against your servo tray and your battery tray. Once that's done, you give it a quick look to make sure you didn't accidentally get something crooked or whatever. I'll go ahead and glue F3 in place. It doesn't take very much glue, just a little. You want to make sure that you don't have your fingers over these tabs and slots, or you will glue yourself to them. After you do that one, we'll go ahead and glue the servo tray. This whole time I'm just very lightly holding this. I'm not putting any pressure whatsoever on anything. That's all self-jigging itself together. If you put pressure on it, chances are you're going to twist or warp the fuselage, and we don't want to do that. So just handle it with kid gloves. Okay, we just glued the battery tray in. Now we'll glue F2 in. On one side. And then we'll hit the bottom of the battery tray. I highly recommend using these capillary tubes. You can put on a really nice thin bead of glue, just enough, and help keep the weight down. Then we'll glue the servo tray on the back side. And then F3 on the side that we hadn't glued yet. Oh, you got that. You got that. Okay. So now that we got that, we will go ahead and glue the firewall in place. The flange part of the blind nuts go to the inside. That way when you tighten up your screws to mount your motor, it doesn't pull the blind nuts out. Okay, you want to make sure it's fully seated. It shouldn't take much pressure or anything to line up. Make sure it's equal to the front edge of the fuselage sides, and then go ahead and glue it in place. I initially used thin CA to get it tacked in place. And then, yep, she set off. Once it's in place, I'll take some medium CA and put kind of a fillet of glue in there. Just make sure you don't get it inside the threads of your blind nuts, or you have trouble when it comes time to mount your motor. Okay, set that off. Now we're going to join the tail now, and this is the easiest, simplest way to do it. And if you do, like I say, you'll get it pretty darn straight. You can use painter's tape or Scotch tape. Go ahead and line it up, top and bottom, back edge, and then tape it in place. Once you have it taped in place, give a sight down it to make sure that it's still nice and straight. And then I'll take a drop or two of thin glue. You don't want to put any pressure or twist in it. You just want to be lightly holding this. And put a thin bead of glue in there to get to set up. And since that's probably already set up, here again, F4, the aft fuselage, you'll see there's arrows. means that side goes up, you will push it in there like that. Put one tab in place, rotate it forward until you get the other tab in place. And you'll know once you do, because everything will be just lined up just right. Okay. And here again, I'm just very, very light pressure holding this in place. And we'll go ahead and glue it. Glue it on both sides. And by this time, you can, your tail will definitely be set up. You can take your Scotch tape or your painter's tape off. And let's see if I can, you'll see that this method gets a pretty darn straight fuselage. No twist, nothing crazy going on. A good start to a good flying airplane. Okay, so let's see here. We will go ahead and put our forward fuselage doublers in place. There'll be two in each one. In your kit, there will be two longer wing dowels that you mount your lower wing to. Go ahead and take one out of your hardware bag and slide these into place. It'll take just a little bit of finagling to get them lined up just right. But not much. And what we're after is to double up this fuselage bottom, the wing brace, and the landing gear. So once those are in place, carefully twist. Oh, it dropped down on me. Gosh darn it. Okay, so be very careful you do not glue this wing dowel in at this time. What I'd recommend is tack gluing the forward edge of each of these in place, at the forward part staying away from that wing dowel. Okay, now once you have that forward part, pull that wing dowel out so you don't glue it in place, and then you can glue the rest of it. Use thin CA. When you use thin CA and go along this edge, it'll wick completely through to the other side. And we'll do it here on this one. I think my glue tip's getting a little clogged up. There we go. Okay. Alright, these other two straight ones go right along the top. You just want to get them flush with the top of the fuselage. Again, we're not going to put any glue on them. We're going to slide them in place. There's enough of a friction fit that you don't have to worry about them falling out. And then we're going to repeat the gluing just like we did on the bottom. Gosh darn it. This is really hard to do, making sure I have it in screen and do the job at the same time. So bear with me, guys. Alright, we'll put some glue there. Alright. So those are in place. All right. Let's see here. Let's do the rest of the fuselage top, which you'll need this piece. It's the only piece in that part. You'll need these two pieces. We will lightly sand those sprue ticks off. We're going to do both sides. Okay. And we will want to glue these together. You can use thin CA, but I like to use medium. It gives me a second to line it up, slide them together, make sure I got them nice and flat and straight. And since I'm in a hurry, we will set it off with some accelerator. Okay. So on your fuselage, you will see that right here at the F3 former, there's a slight depression right there. That's where your upper forward turtle deck goes. It goes flush up against that, and it will hang over in front of F2. This acts as your aft hatch, or your aft hatch attaches. I'm at a loss of words. It's Monday morning. Okay, so carefully line this up. It's slightly oversized so that it will overhang on each side just a little bit. And then from the inside of the fuselage, it's going to be hard to show this on camera, but go ahead and glue this in place. And my glue tip is officially clogged. I'll try this again. Go ahead and glue your top in place. Again, just light pressure on the frame while you're doing this because you don't want to twist it or warp it. And we'll do this one. Make sure you glue it to the formers also. Okay. Now that's in place. We'll go ahead and there's a couple little sprue ticks on the top. Let's just basically wipe them away with the sanding block. Don't go crazy sanding. Just a couple wipes, light wipes is all it takes to even those out. And your other piece will get glued right to the top. Chances are it will slightly overhang this back edge, but that's okay because it's real easy to trim after it's in place. So what we'll do is we'll line it up as close as we can. Again, this is slightly oversized on both sides. That way it's real easy to glue in place. And we'll just take our capillary tube and run a tiny bead down each side. Again, just light pressure. I just glued my finger. My glue got hot fast. Alright, we'll glue the bulkhead. And then we'll glue this last part. There's a big warning at this point. Do not go ahead and glue your bottom piece on until you have your push rods routed. Because if you do, you won't be able to route your push rods through the push rod guides on this former. So do not put your bottom fuselage piece on until you have your push rods routed through. Okay. Now we will prep for the forward lower. Just since we glued those doublers in there, it will take just a light sanding to even them up, and to take just a little bit of an acute angle off your firewall. Okay, the piece for that, oops, that's right. This is your lower forward piece, and if you followed along, it should fit right around your landing gear wire. It should fit flush with the plywood former, and it should come just shy of the firewall. Alright, so you can't get to this one real easy from the other side with thin CA and the capillary tube, so I'm going to use some medium CA. Run a bead along each edge. Set it in place where I know it needs to go. Just a little light pressure for a couple seconds. Probably all it'll take. I'm going to go ahead and fire it off anyway. Okay. So now, let's go ahead and do the hatch. Your hatch pieces are here on this sheet of wood. It's your main hatch piece. It's your forward anchor, and these are your hatch tangs. You don't need to worry about sanding the tabs or anything off of those. On your hatch itself, you'll want to just lightly sand and take those screw tangs off, screw ticks. It doesn't take much. Same on your forward hold down. Oop, almost dropped it. Alright, so what I like to do is just go ahead and glue the hatch tangs on. You want them to overlap at least a 1/16, maybe just a hair more. Make sure they're centered up, and then glue it in place. That was a lot of glue. And do the same thing on the other side. Center it up. And glue her in place. You'll want to either use accelerator on this or let it dry very well. Because the next steps, if you don't, the next steps, you'll end up gluing your hatch to your fuselage, and you don't want to do that. Okay, so now that we have these in place, you can see that I got the hatch tang just a little too far forward, but that's okay, because that means we can really custom fit this. We will sand this just a little bit. Usually don't take too much till it fits down in there. Okay. Now, we can your hatch latch will be slightly oversized. That's on purpose, because each one of these we do always turns out just a little bit different for some reason. We'll go ahead and glue this in place after you check your alignment. Make sure your hatch is not on here while you're gluing it, and wait for your glue to dry good before you try to install your hatch. Otherwise, you'll glue your hatch to the fuselage. You don't want to do that, or you won't be able to get to your battery. Okay, so as you can see, real simple hatch. You just slightly bend it and she'll pop right in there. Real easy, simple, effective. No added weight. Try it. I think you'll like it. Alright, so after you do that, any excess you can trim off with the knife. I'll save the sanding for later. Okay, so next, we want to route our push rods before we glue that bottom in. Oh, I dropped one. Okay, there's another one. I prefer to leave the Z-bend towards the control surface. I don't like to add any extra weight to the tail. If you come in from this side, you'll want to go to that hole on that former. Then, let's get my fingers out of the way. Then you'll want to go into that hole. Okay, so that one's in. Now we're going to do this side, and they're going to crisscross right there. Try to get it on the video here. Okay. You can see how they crisscross, and it goes through the opposing hole. And then it will go through that hole. Okay. Now your push rod wires are extra long on purpose. That way, depending upon what motor and battery and everything you use, you can put your servos in the aft tray or the forward tray. So now that that's in place, we can lightly sand the bottom of the fuselage in preparation for the bottom fuselage piece, which is this sheet right here. So we'll pop this one out, we'll pop the little holes, like your cooling holes out, and we'll put the pretty side out. Oh, don't forget to now this piece back here is pretty delicate, so you'll want to be careful until we get the doubler glued on. We'll do that. Then you want to line it up with this bulkhead here. And it should go just past the end of the fuselage. And once you do that, make sure she's lined up. Again, this is slightly wider than the actual fuselage, and that was on purpose, so that we can glue this from the outside. Because once this is in place, we don't have any access anywhere else. So we'll go ahead and run a... Oh, you see the smoke coming off? We got us a good joint. Okay. Again, just light pressure, keeping it in place. Let's see. If you can do this better than me right now, you can put a drop of CNCA and you can watch it wick down the joint. Which we got that pretty good now. Now we're going to go to the other side. Do the same thing. I'm getting a little sloppy. If you take your time, unlike I'm doing right now, you won't get much on the fuselage to have to sand off before you paint. Okay. Now on the piece you just removed that fuselage bottom from, you're going to take this piece out. It's a doubler for your tail skid. And it gets glued in place right there. So what I recommend doing is finding your plywood piece, find your tail skid, pop it out, take some medium glue or slower setting glue, set it in about the right place, as close as you can, and then take your tail skid and just make sure that you got it lined up. And as soon as you know you got it lined up, take it out. Because you don't want to glue it in place just yet, because we got a little bit of sanding to do. Oh! You guys saw that, didn't you? Okay. I'll line this up one more time. And unstick my thumb. And hopefully it didn't glue right in. Okay. So that worked better that time. So we got that lined up. Okay. So right now, all we got left on the fuselage is sanding and to mount the cabanes. But you want to sand, you want to finish sand your whole fuselage before you mount the cabanes. Because if you mount the cabanes, you won't be able to sand any of this where the cabanes come up. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to take a break for a second, and then we'll come back and we'll go over the cabane assembly and installation.